You know, I'm going to cheat a little bit because I'm going to take an extra minute. And I want to use that minute to thank a few people. This is an opportunity, a very rare and precious opportunity. And particularly Anjali, Priyanka, and my wonderful sister-in-law Urvashi for the Shift series that we're all part of. It's just a wonderful thing. The TGELF team for the huge amount of themselves they've put into all of this. And two extraordinary human beings, Mrs. Ishwaran and my wonderful brother Shiv. Mr. Munjal earlier on said, what did we do in a previous life to be born with the privilege we have now? And I consider it a very great privilege to have been born as a brother of such a very special being. So both Mrs. Ishwaran and Shiv are just shining lights, and the people around them are shining lights. So thank you to all of you. I'm also very deeply grateful. I am very deeply grateful for this opportunity. It's a very, very precious and unique opportunity for me because I genuinely believe, as I've got to know many of you over the last 24 hours, that you really will save the world. Some of you will save the world in small ways and big ways, in education and healthcare, and a few of you will choose to actually save the world. And the world really needs saving right now. And whether it is one of you who will do that, one great leader, or whether all of you working together in that TGELF spirit, I have no idea, but I really, really believe it. And so if I've been given a few moments to contribute a few words to you, that's a huge privilege and a huge opportunity, and thank you for that. But it also means that I have very limited time. And in this very, very limited time, I wanted to just say, I don't want to make a speech, I want to sit here imagining you were with me and we were having a coffee, one-to-one, and we were speaking from the heart about something that might be the greatest challenge of our times. I think it is the greatest challenge of our times. And we didn't have time and we'd already talked by the stage of this discussion about quite how serious climate change is. And it's not a coincidence I'm speaking after Malika, who spoke so beautifully earlier on. I want you to hold in your minds the image of that Antarctic collapse, those 60 meters or those 6 meters. We would have talked about the consequences for India. As she mentioned, we have over 200 million people living in our coastal areas, and Bangladesh and we are the same. How many tens of millions of people would be in huge suffering? The collapse of the Himalayan glacial system. What would it mean? Drought, devastation, floods. The collapse of our monsoon, even if it shifts by 1 degree and Punjab becomes Rajasthan. What does it mean? Famine. I don't mean to scare you, and it's fashionable in the climate community not to speak of fear. I just think we need to be real about this. We wouldn't have time to talk about my personal journey and the moment that I realized that everything I was doing in the development sector would get washed away if we didn't engage fundamentally in this, and how we as a family, as a foundation, have deeply tried our best with limited resources to throw ourselves at this problem. I would not have time. I would have talked to you already about the despondency we all felt after Copenhagen, the collapse of the international process, for reasons that Neil's wonderful workshop yesterday helped us understand better. And most importantly, my sadness and the sadness of many of us who've been in this community at the news this year that in April and May, we have passed 400 ppm. For many years, the community struggled for a 380 ppm outer target 10 years ago. Well, we've just blown it and permanently blown it. And what that means is the great likelihood of a world of over 2 degrees of warming locked in. And the suffering and consequences of that we would have talked about. So the last thing I would have done before I start to speak today is fundamentally to have apologized to you for the failure of the generation before us and my generation, because we haven't made it happen so far. But what I want to talk about today is not any of that, but hope. Why hope? Because things are beginning to change. The 3 great nations who fundamentally, in my opinion, undermined the Copenhagen consensus because they'd never been engaged, the United States, China, and India, all now see leadership that is increasingly committed to climate change mitigation in ways that would have been inconceivable 10 years ago. And that gives us an opportunity. There is a really unique moment right now. That unique moment is also because of what's happening in industry and what's happening in the energy industry, a subject Neil knows so well. Shale gas has bought us just a little bit of time. Not much, but just a tiny amount. More importantly, the collapse in costs of industries like the solar industry can unleash a vast consumer energy revolution that will be clean if we grab it and bring it to scale. And the technology and innovation that Malika was talking about are accelerating. And there is therefore a huge opportunity for all of you to make a vast difference. Don't ask, how do I do it? Because the truth is it's all around you, whether it's in science or policy, in technology, in politics, in business, and for the sake of Sanya, even in finance. In every single area of human life, you can make a vast difference if you throw yourself into this as champions. I've been involved since Rio in '92. I do not believe that there is a better moment than now. And it is a moral imperative. Imagine somebody in your family who you really love was dying of a terrible disease. Wouldn't you throw yourself into it with everything you have without hesitation? Wouldn't you try and find them the best doctors and the best medicine? In this case, in my analogy, the technology, the business, the government, the science. Wouldn't you do all that? You would. But would it be enough? Would it really cure the patient? I have begun to believe in these last years that it will not be enough. Unfortunately, I think everything I've said so far treats the symptoms of the disease, not the underlying illness. The roots of the climate change crisis and its fundamental solutions lie much deeper. To understand this, I just want to share one simple equation. And the equation is this, that the total amount of carbon in the atmosphere is a function of the total number of people on this planet, times the amount they consume, times the amount of energy in each unit of consumption, the energy intensity, times the amount of carbon in every unit of energy. Now the thing is, there are two vast elephants in the room. Because all of us in our community, in the climate mitigation community, focus on the last two of those equations, energy intensity and carbon intensity. Almost nobody is focusing on the underlying fundamental mathematics of the first two parts of that equation, the vast population growth, and even more, the huge growth in consumption. The Western world in these last tiny blip of time, 200 years, particularly the last 40, 50 years, has created this huge damaging problem. 1 billion people, the model that took them to this place, is now moving to at least 4 out of the 7 billion people on the planet. I personally am very skeptical about the mathematics. My statistics are 2 years old, but the average Indian then consumed 1/26th of the average American. The average Chinese person, 1/13th. Do the maths. If we're at almost 3 billion by the mid-century, India and China combined, and we start to imitate the West, there is no way productivity and energy efficiency alone will get us there. Something fundamental has to change. Mohandas Gandhi in 1948, just before he died, said that if we as India start to imitate the West, I'm paraphrasing, in this regard, we will strip the planet naked like locusts. India alone. Think about the whole world doing that. And this has strained every single natural system on the planet. Think about it. It's not just climate change. Vast deforestation. Amazon jungle the size of Belgium every year. We don't want to hear about it. Species extinction. The great, vast species extinction that's happening now. They all come from one cause. We were 80% forest cover 100 years ago, we're at 12%. We were 150 million people in this country, we're at 1.2 billion. Think about it. But at the end of the day, a great climate theorist called Bob Sokolow took me aside one day and showed me the work he'd been doing. And he said, look, it's not really actually about just the population. It's about that excess consumption. The richest people in the world are consuming a far greater percentage of that carbon space than we all imagine, leaving very, very little of that space for those who are at the basic stages of development. So what's the core of this? The core of this is the vast overconsumption in our society. This philosophy, this civilizational mode, this civilizational being of consumptive materialism, overconsumption, call it what you will. Where has that come from? I fundamentally believe that this is not a coincidence. It's great spread across the planet. It is fundamental and structural in the nature of what's going on. We need a Karl Marx to theorize this. I haven't come across that yet. Of course, we had a variety of great climate and environment theorists from the 70s. But to put it all together, because it all fits together, the way states, except for Bhutan, measure success as the generation of increasing productive consumption and its corollaries in production, and the need to grow constantly, and the fear of not growing. The way businesses measure themselves in this complete obsession with producing and growing to allow people to consume, not necessarily for the bottom of the pyramid. The way we as individuals have been encouraged to see our own human happiness as lying in the wealth that allows us to consume, and the need to consume, which is fundamentally and structurally and powerfully trained in our consciousness every single day through the media. These things fit together in a system of institutional incentives. Does this work? Is that any good? That's the wrong way around. Doesn't matter. And it all fits together, except for my microphone. But if you wake up and just see what's going on with some distance to it, it's a mode of civilization. And as an Indian, I would call it a mode of civilization of generating Maya, of generating vast illusion. And we are in this system right now, so we can't see it. Lord Buddha said in the Dhammapada, all the world arises with our thoughts. With our thoughts, we make the world. Climate change is a product of consciousness, civilizational consciousness. Gandhiji said, there is, to paraphrase something that all of you know, there is enough for everyone's need, but not for everyone's greed. The core of this is the civilizational greed that we're taught to believe is inevitable, is part of our destiny. So why do I said I was going to talk about hope. So why do I have hope? Why do we have hope? Gandhiji was asked often by a small number of satyagrahis around him, particularly in the beginning, how on earth do we take on the vast might of empire? And he would say that 5 Pandav brothers took on 100 Kauravas because they had one thing on their side, and I'm sorry to use a religious analogy, they had one thing on their side, which was truth. Because this overconsumption is a vast civilizational untruth that relates to a deep personal untruth, that our happiness depends on endless amounts of consumption. I'm not talking about the basic needs that every family needs, every human needs to be happy. But this vast obsession with materialism is a personal untruth. We know it deep in our hearts, that it's about our families, it's about the peace that comes from within, it's about loving, it's about giving, it's about everything TGAP stands for. That is what will make us happy. We know that. And yet, we still drink the Kool-Aid. So truth itself is what gives us hope. Like a little lamp lights up a huge area of darkness. That truth that comes from our own natures, I believe, is very powerful and is able to disseminate across civilization and is disseminating now. I think the hope lies in the fact that there is a vast civilizational change happening in reaction to what's happened in the last 200 years. And if you look for it, you can see it. This re-spiritualization of civilization is beginning to happen. I don't know how many of you saw the Time magazine with mindfulness, the Mindfulness Revolution on its cover. But there are corollaries everywhere. The fact that for the last 2 years they've been teaching meditation at Davos, inconceivable 10 years ago. The fact that at Harvard Business School, the Authentic Leadership Development Program is the most popular, both MBA and executive program on campus, is all about ontological leadership and is run by people who are all meditators. The fact that Whole Foods board meditates, the Synergos board meditates. I'm sorry, I know I'm behind. Just give me a few more moments. And the technology and government, the fact that Senate, there's a meditation group in the Senate now. The US military, they go and kill people, but then bring these poor soldiers back who have all this pain in them, and they're using transcendental meditation in something called the Warrior Wellness Program. Medicine, journal articles coming out about mind and body. Our mother was ill with atrial fibrillation. Articles on how atrial fibrillation outcomes are much, much better with meditation. It is everywhere, should you choose to look for it. Technology, apps, Mindspace apps that help you, not only mindfulness, but Christian apps. It's just happening everywhere. It's shocking. And I genuinely believe the world of 2050 will be a world in which we will look back at this moment and say, did you really think that these problems lay outside you for the most part? All these problems, are they not problems of consciousness? And that the world we see then will be one that binds together all the things we've talked about in a mindful civilization. The Dalai Lama famously said that dharma for him was remembering to switch off the lights when he left the hotel room. Mindful in that sense, but also mindful in the sense of locating human happiness where it belongs and leading modest lifestyles that create the carbon space for people to really develop out of poverty. So perhaps you, T-Guelph champions, can also accelerate that future today. And I think that future, if you want to accelerate it, requires that leadership from within, that personal transformation that all of you are naturally so attracted to go deep into it to find freedom. Freedom from the civilization of Kool-Aid, freedom inside yourself from fear, freedom to find the right places inside yourself. And I would talk about just a few gifts of freedom as you become that champion that will save the world. One, the freedom of deep insight, to be free of the delusion that we are all caught in. The freedom of aspiration that makes you believe you can actually save the world and that you'll work with all your peers to do so. The freedom from fragmentation, something you've already talked about, that you will use all yourselves, your businessman in you, your technologist in you, your networker in you, but also the deepest part of you for this mission. The freedom from fear about the results. We may fail. To surrender that fundamentally to the universe and to do your best and to surrender the rest. And the freedom from your own ego, which ultimately, back to the Karate Kid point, I kind of go with the Karate Kid message because I fundamentally think that if we think we choose our destiny with our minds, we actually limit our destiny. And that the emptying and hollowing of ourselves allows ourselves to arise with the deeper self. And that if we can only just restrict our ego in this mission, the sails of our destiny will fill. So what is that wind that will fill those sails? I believe that is compassion. Right? Sorry, just 2 minutes. I'm almost there. I was told that we were not too far over. I'm almost done. I've got the Metta Sutra, one verse to read to you. So what is that will fill the sails of your destiny? I believe that is the deepest form of compassion, taking ownership for the pain of the planet. And I just want to take, I don't know whether you guys have read the Metta Sutra. I strongly encourage you to do so. It's very beautiful. It talks about how every single being in the sky, on the land, underwater, be born and unborn, let every being be out of suffering. There's one beautiful, it says, without exception, one beautiful verse. Even as a mother protects her life, with her life, her child, her only child, so with a boundless heart should one cherish all living beings. With that spirit in you, save the planet. Do not hesitate now. Throw yourself into it. Be the hero that you truly are and fulfill your deepest, deepest destiny. Thank you for giving me a few extra minutes.
Thank you. Thank you, Uday.
T-Gelf, leading the change.